Alpha males, reach down, grab a hold, gird your loins. For this reloaded episode of Alpha Male Podcast, recently reached out to the patrons and asked them for some of their favorite, most impactful, stand out, liked, remembered, made a difference, those kind of things. My hope is that you listening, if you're not a current patron, that you will join and become a patron. Help promote this message to make godly men strong and strong men godly. If you're not a patron, there's a lot of brand new content there. I added a new tier so you can sign up for $1. $1 to become a patron. Patreon content like video, Patreon only episodes, or my actual coordinates for actual bug out locations all over the country. Anyway, if you want to become a patron, check out the Patreon link in the show notes. What is going on, alpha males? Saddle up for Alpha Male Podcast, where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, made in the image of God, strong, dominant, and in control. And we don't apologize for that. Now, I think part of that is survival. Good times or bad. Being able to love your neighbor as yourself. Keeping yourself and those around you safe and secure. Providing for them, protecting them. Now, that being said, just statistically, the vast majority of the U.S. population lives in urban areas. Also, I was recently doing some analytics. By God's grace, the podcast is growing, and I've been studying data and analytics. Not all of the podcasts, it's just me talking into a microphone. There's a lot of work that goes into every minute that comes out on the mic that you hear. And part of that was studying analytics, and I was kind of surprised to see a big chunk of the listeners from New York City, Seattle, Philadelphia, and places like that. But I guess that makes sense because that's where people live. So, I'm here to serve you. How can I serve you in this? I praise the Lord God and thank Him for all that He's allowed me to do. I'll plug in the bio. But He's blessed me to do many things. Today, when I'm recording this, is the 20th anniversary, I believe, to the day of the fall of Baghdad. I was there for the invasion of Iraq. He got me through that safely. I was there for the fall of Baghdad. I was there before it fell. I got to see a very large metropolitan city descend into chaos. Literally. From very sophisticated, normal-looking country to a war-torn scene that you might see in a post-apocalyptic film. I got to see that. How can I share those experiences and help you, to serve you? Also, I was LAPD. I've been in large metropolitan areas. I've seen civil unrest and rioting and looting. And things hopefully you don't have to see, but I have seen them. And if I can use that to help you, I would like to. I'm here to serve you. That being said, if you appreciate that service, consider becoming a patron and supporting the podcast to grow it so other men can be likewise helped and impacted. There should be a link in the show notes for Patreon. With that, I'm going to plug in the bio, and then we'll get into urban survival. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement. LAPD, I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast regional rifle champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Milito. Welcome to the podcast. Now let's talk about survival. Urban survival, because I think, myself included, I prefer to be in the country, and a lot of preppers and survivalists do. I think it's the best place to be for life in general. You know, to be healthy and well-adjusted. But also for survival and apocalypse type scenarios. That being said, most people don't, and I get that. I've lived large chunks of my life in large metropolitan areas, even when I would rather not. I'm being honest, I really enjoyed some of my job, LAPD. I didn't want to live in LA, but I went back to a large metropolitan area as the commander of a tactical team. I was a couple of days away from shipping out to Afghanistan on a contract, and I got offered a job to be the commander, primarily to stop active shooters here on American soil. How could I turn that down? That required me to live in a large metropolitan area. Whatever your reasons are, I can't deny that a lot of people do. So how can I help you survive in these areas? Let's talk about some urban survival skills. The number one, navigation. Now, depending on how big a city, this may or may not apply to you, but it probably does. Even if you think you know your city pretty well, as somebody that's lived in large cities, you probably spend the vast majority of your time in a very small area of that city. Maybe you grew up there and have been all around it. But a lot of times we live in a little neighborhood and we go shopping to whatever grocery store is close and convenient, and we like the prices near our house. And we might go to a gym near our house, and then maybe even if we go to work at a different part of the city, we get on the freeway, and we pretty much go the same way all the time. And there's giant swaths of that city that perhaps we never step foot in, that we're strangers in. Know how to navigate. One of my first things I'm going to tell you to do, instead of just listen, to try and do when you're not in a hurry. So maybe when you get off work, so you're not late for work. But go a different way. Get off the freeway at a different exit, maybe a couple of different times. Check out different areas and routes home. You should have a primary route home, a contingency route home, and an emergency. Different routes. You may also want to have an actual map of your city, like an old Thomas guide of your city. And if things get really bad and you're stuck at work or in your cubicle for a few minutes when a major disaster hits, those freeways may not be viable at all. In fact, most roads may not be. You may look at alternate routes. But navigation in a city, a compass and a map is not just something for the Sawtooth Wilderness in Idaho or a sailor on the high seas. It can very much come in handy, especially if you're talking about some kind of scenario where the grid is down, electricity's down, your navigation systems are not working, your electronic ones. A map and a compass can go a long way. So navigation in a city, absolutely. Another one, and I think this is a manly skill you should have whether you live in a city or not, lock picking. And let me just state, from Judeo-Christian values, you shall not steal. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. If a man is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. So, used in the right context. But I absolutely have and continue to have and know how to use lockpicks. They come in handy for lots of reasons. As you might surmise from my background, I have quite a bit of urban operations. I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. Sometimes you just want to kick down a door. Sometimes you want to be quiet about it. In fact, I think I got my first set of lockpicks in the Marine Corps, if I'm remembering that correctly. Also, to stop active shooters or as a police officer, there are times when I need to access an area that I'm totally lawfully allowed to be in, but I don't have time to wait for a key. Lockpicks come in handy. Also, just for your day-to-day life. Have you ever locked yourself out of your house? Have you ever locked yourself out of your garage or something with a padlock on it, or lost a key? Or a friend that's locked themselves out of the house, or any number of legit, perfectly morally viable scenarios where you might need lockpicks. Have lockpicks. Know how to use them. They're not that expensive. They're not that hard to learn how to use. If you are like a lot of city people and you spend a big chunk of your time in cubicles and you get a couple of breaks during the day, you can absolutely just carry in an old lock or two and practice picking locks. It's not that hard. It's not rocket science. Lock picking, a viable skill. I don't think I need to illustrate why that will be important in a survival scenario in a city. Escape and evasion in these big type scenarios. Whether it's local to just your city or nationwide, worldwide, who knows what it is. But escape and evasion, being able to get through obstacles. I think I'll cover that more when I get to urban survival blades. Next one is scavenging and foraging. Now, I'm going to cover, again, you shall not steal. There's also biblical precedents for when you can take stuff lawfully. I'm going to read you those now. If you don't want to hear Bible and Alpha Male podcast, then tough. Go listen to something else. But I'd say right in the beginning, from Judeo-Christian values. When you come into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes at your pleasure, but you shall not put any in your container. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. Urban foraging. You might be surprised what's edible in a city that a lot of people don't even think about. I have seen almond trees and palm dates and all kinds of plum trees in cities that just literally drop food on the ground that people drive by to go to a store to pay who knows how much for the organic equivalent of that same food. One, because they may just not even know what a wild or a natural almond looks like. It's still a cultivated almond, so I guess it's not wild. It's a cultivated almond tree. People oftentimes will just drive right past those. So maybe know where those are ahead of time. If times get bad, maybe go and know where those sources are. Crab apples. They're in a lot of cities, and they're absolutely edible and delicious. Also, there's a lot of animal protein in cities, most of it disgusting and unclean, like rats, cul-de-sacs for parasites. They're not clean. One thing I would absolutely consider clean and do eat and have trapped are pigeons. Now, you may turn your nose up at pigeons, but in a lot of countries, they're absolutely a food source. In fact, I do believe the rock dove, or what we call an American pigeon, was brought here to America for food. Go look that up and verify that for yourself. And when I was living in a large metropolitan area, not able to do as much hunting and stuff as I would like, I didn't want to get too soft, so I would absolutely trap, and I would trap pigeons. And I would go to a job where I was in a nice fancy environment wearing a nice collared shirt. And you know what? Outside of work, I would trap pigeons and slay them and throw them in a frying pan and eat them delicious. Because I still wanted to maintain that ability to gather and forage and hunt and trap. Pigeons are in almost every major city that I can think of in the U.S. and they are an absolute clean, delicious source of protein. Not only that, but you can trap them pretty easily. You can buy a commercial pigeon trap, which I have done. But what I find even easier and works better is literally just fishing line or kite string tied into snares. and you can literally just take a tent stake or a stick and pound it into the ground with several loops around it and trap pigeons, and they're delicious. You think that might gross you out? Go look at how a pigeon lives, and then actually go into a commercial chicken house and tell me which one of those animals is cleaner. Because my best friend growing up grew up on a chicken farm. I spent time walking through chicken houses where those animals literally live in their own feces, walking around their own dead. And you tell me which one of those animals is cleaner. So before you dismiss it offhand, maybe look at that. But you absolutely can forage and trap and do many other things in a city. And if you're still turning your nose up at that, maybe go hungry for a couple of days and see how good fried pigeon looks to you. Anyway, with that, hunting and foraging absolutely can be a thing in cities. You just have to look at it a different way. There are many things that grow in cities. Not as much, but a lot of people, especially at first, probably won't even realize that they're food in this world. Let me tell you another story real quick. I'm now here in Florida with my wife, whom I love, and that's the reason I'm here, and she wanted to spend some time with family. Well, my Rhodesian Ridgeback and I, Alexander Hamilton, who I've also taught to forage, we're in the backyard eating acorns. He's learned to eat acorns as well. And massive amounts of mass crop, which is acorns, dropping here. I'm in the backyard eating acorns, and she's got a niece, and back there, I think, hanging out with them just to spend time with them, and I'm gathering acorns and eating them. And she said something to the effect of, "That's not food," or "That's not people food." And I said, "Well, I'm eating them." And she says, "Well, yeah, but you're not normal." And I can't argue with that. I am not normal and don't pretend to be and don't want to be. I'm a peculiar person. I absolutely know that acorns are food. And what's strange about that is, in today's culture, she's right. Most people wouldn't eat acorns out of the backyard. But throughout most of human history, people absolutely would value acorns. They are a delicious source of many nutrients. Now, some you can't just pick up and eat off the ground. You have to know your type of oak tree that produces what type of acorn. Some need to be cooked. Some need some tannins and stuff brought out. Some need to be soaked in water, boiled, cooked. Some can just be eaten. You should probably know that. But many cities have a lot of acorn crop. That's just another example of how you can forage in a city. Now, I'm doing a brief flyby of several of these topics. If this is popular, you guys like this, goodshepherdtraining.com. Contact me, let me know maybe what you'd like to hear more about. I don't want to turn this podcast into urban survival alpha male because not everybody's into this. But I think it is important. So just letting you know, we're going to move on to the next kind of subcategory here in urban survival. Where do you go? We might cover bugging out later, but where do you go in the city? You probably don't want to stay where you are unless you absolutely have to. Especially after a couple of days or weeks when looting and rioting and killing and all manner of atrocities are likely to occur in cities. Maybe you can get out of the city, maybe you cannot, or at least not right away. Where are some places you can look at? Well, again, I'm going to tell you a story. What is it they often say on those shows? Like, I don't even have TV and haven't for a long time, but the names have been changed, but maybe based on real events or something like that. I'm going to use things that I know from my past and make up a scenario here for you. Now, I was, my more specialized assignments, LAPD, fugitive recovery, warrant service, catching people with warrants. All right, that part is true. I'm going to make up some names and scenarios to kind of illustrate a point here. Let's say Officer Milito is looking for, let's say I'm hunting a young blood, street name Lil Nasty. Right, he's wanted for, and I'm making this up, he's wanted for BFMV, burglary from a motor vehicle, felony, because of the value of the things taken that he's alleged of. He's not been on trial yet, but my job is to track him down, hunt him, catch him, bring him before a magistrate. Now, I'm hunting Lil Nasty. Well, first I'd go to his last known residence. Say he's not there. I'd check and see if he had any aunts, uncles, sisters in the area. Nah. None of that checks out for me. Let's say, and we did a thing, I'm not LAPD anymore, we did a thing called an FI card, field interview. A lot of times when you would stop somebody, you would interview them, take their information, and there's a place on there, known associates. Maybe he's been stopped a couple times. Maybe he's got a known associate. Let's say he's got a known associate he's been associated with several times. Young Sneezy. Right? Young Sneezy's about as ridiculous a gang name as many others. Well, he got FI'd, and one time he was hanging out with Young Sneezy. Another time, they were both arrested for Grand Theft Auto, together in the same car. Lil Nasty, Young Sneezy. Well, I look at addresses, vehicle registration, things like that for Young Sneezy. I get a couple of addresses. I drive around the hood looking for him. I also might look up any cars registered to Young Sneezy. And lo and behold, at one of those addresses that he's been associated with in the past, there's a vehicle registered. Well, that's probably my best bet. Guess where I'm staking out? Guess where I'm looking? That address. To catch Lil Nasty. What's the point of that story? Well, it's not that hard to track whether it's a deer in the wilderness or a human being in a city. I've done that for a living. Think about the most likely places people are going to go. And don't go there. Right? If people run out of food in their house, where are they going to go for food? Probably where they normally go to get food, right? Walmart, or Winco, or Albertsons, or Publix, whatever your part of the country is. Wherever people normally go in that neighborhood to get food, that's where they're going to go because that's where they normally get food. That's probably going to be a problem. Don't go there. Likewise, if there's mass looting and rioting in your city, where do you go when you want stuff? Where do you go when you want nice stuff? Rodeo Drive, Madison Avenue. I'm just making up places in cities. Don't go there. Don't be there. Don't be anywhere near there. Certainly don't bug out to there. Don't hide out there. Wherever it's most likely that you would go, don't go there. Places you might want to go in the short term until you can perhaps get out of the city. How about rail? Remember trains? They're still a thing. Why railway and rail stations and rail cars? Exactly. Most people don't think of it. Probably a good place to go. A lot of times on railroad tracks, they'll have little shacks and outbuildings. One of the big issues in survival, especially in urban survival, is people behaving badly. I got that. I'm not going to take credit for that. I've heard that from Pastor Joe Fox, one of the people I'm a patron of, Viking Preparedness. He talks about the two main things that'll get you after a disaster are starvation and people behaving badly. And from what I've seen, that's pretty right on. So avoid those two things. You should have the food already. So don't go to the places where people are going to be looting and rioting for food and people behaving badly. So don't be around them. And you might think in a city you can't get away from them. But there's areas where you can likely get away from most of them. Talked about rail. Maybe rail cars that aren't even used, haven't been used for decades. Or outbuildings or something like that. That might be a good place to hold up for a while. How about places under construction that aren't complete? Like near me right now, there's a whole little subdivision. It's about to be a people hive. But it's just kind of basically streets and stuff laid out right now. Take the dog running there sometimes. That'd be a good place to go. Why? Because there's nobody there. Nobody lives there. Nobody's going to think to go there. There's not food or anything there, really. There's food for me because I know how to forage. I've seen some edible plants there. But you get the idea. Most people aren't going to go to an under construction people hive. How about airports? And you might think an airport's the last place I'd want to be in a disaster. And I agree, inside the airport. But if you look around airports, they're kind of their own little cities inside a city. They often have big support places that support the airports. Places where they get their, let's say, food that most people aren't going to think of that have food. Also places where they have a bunch of vehicles stored, or maintenance, and all kinds of other outbuildings where people probably aren't going to go in a disaster. Nobody's going to think to go there. That's why you should probably think about going there. Industrial areas. Places that manufacture things. Concrete, steel, any number of things. Why would you go there? Because a lot of people aren't going to think to go there, aren't going to want to go there. It's probably why you should go there. Also, hubs. Those hubs out in those industrial areas may be a good place to hunker down and wait out, let's call it a people storm. Okay, now let's talk about a major killer after a disaster. In many instances, oftentimes it can surpass the number killed in a major disaster itself, like a tornado or a hurricane or earthquake. Dirty water. Dirty water kills a lot of people. And if infrastructure goes down, a lot of cities have city water, which even in normal times can be dicey. Flint, Michigan, that place in Ohio that just had that toxic waste dump, train derailment, or I think now in Minnesota there's some radioactive iridium in water because of a nuclear power plant leak. So even in the best of times, not the greatest place, I don't think, to get water. But if you turn the taps on and nothing comes out. Also, if things like this happen, people have to go to the bathroom. Think about the millions of people that live in the city that you're in going to the bathroom and not being able to flush it. Think about all the places they may go to the bathroom. Think about that, how it relates to water. Right? It's a major killer after disasters. The easiest thing is to store clean water now, but if you have to leave, you're probably not carrying a lot of water with you if you're leaving your apartment complex or whatever it is, or your cul-de-sac. I would encourage you to store water while you can, while it's easy, while it's almost, well, not free, but very inexpensive. But where are some places in an urban environment which many people may not think of to get clean water? Well, hot water heaters. Long after the power goes out, there's probably some water inside that water heater. A lot of water heaters have a thing, I think they probably all do, on them. You can get water out. You can drain water out of there usually, even if there's no water pressure in the rest of the house and the water system is not working. You can still usually find water in the back of that hot water heater, or in the hot water heater. Also, this may gross you out, but in the back of a toilet, a lot of times you can find water back there if you have to. It should have been the same water that came out of the sink or the faucet. It should be clean. It may be one of your best or only options. Also, we talked about industrial. Like, industrial places often have water heaters too, and there are going to be a lot of different designs and things, but you may think about how to get water from there. Also, crucial survival items in any environment. Part of my EDC. Water purification tablets. Is how important I think it is. I think it'd be a toss-up if you said to me you can pick either a knife or like a Sawyer Mini Life Straw water purification tablets, or a knife, one of those. It'd probably be dead even for me. Because in an urban environment, I can likely find something to make a knife. But drinking dirty water very, very well may kill me or lead me to a stage where it's very easy for somebody else to kill me. Again, dirty water kills a lot of people. So absolutely. You might not be able to carry enough water, but an entire thing of water purification tablets that you can buy at Walmart doesn't take up a lot of room, and you can purify a lot of water. So something like that, iodine, knowing how to use iodine to purify water, knowing how to make a rudimentary water filter with like crushed charcoal and sand. You may look at things like that. I mentioned the Sawyer Mini. They're my favorite. Life Straws will work. I don't like them as much. I've used both, and I have extensively used both. I much prefer a Sawyer Mini, but either one of those or something else like it. I think that is crucial and should not be overlooked. I would even carry that on my person in this kind of scenario rather than in my pack, because I may have to ditch my pack to sprint or get over a fence or a wall or something and lose my pack. That's an item I really want to have on me, because again, dirty water kills a lot of people. On the dirty, Another very crucial thing, antibiotics. Antibiotics are one of the great things and breakthroughs that we've gotten in our societies and cultures in the past 100 years, where they've become commonplace. And they're not expensive. You might look into antibiotics, both topical, like Neosporin, and common antibiotics, like penicillin, amoxicillin, doxycycline. These are things that literally you would trade every ounce of gold and every gun and round of ammunition that you have if you're dying of a massive infection and need antibiotics. Because without it, you'll die. You would give everything you have for a usable dose of antibiotics. So why not get them when they're easy and not very expensive? Antibiotics, knowing how to use them, maybe take a Sharpie and write doses for common things on the bottle itself. Little pro tip for you there. I'm not going to tell you how to get antibiotics. You should be able to deduce that for yourself. It's not that hard. And I'm not telling you to take unprescribed antibiotics. I'd probably get in trouble for that. But, as they say, read between the lines. Now, we talked about water. Let's talk about fire. Now, this is one of the big benefits of being in an urban environment. I think I'll close with benefits. But if you're in an urban environment, you can probably find a way to make fire. Most houses and things will have a lighter or something. And you can usually find, even long after a disaster, a battery with some kind of charge. And if you have a battery with a charge, and you have a gum wrapper, steel wool, it's not that hard to make a fire. So that's a big advantage of the urban environment. But that's not what I'm talking about. If you look at before well-run professional fire departments were a thing, for entire cities burn. Rome, Chicago, just to name a few briefly. If there's a major disaster, it's likely there will be no water pressure. Also, it's likely that the fire department will not be functional if it's a big enough disaster. So when a fire starts, especially somebody that's cold, that doesn't have a way to heat the house, and they do something they probably shouldn't do, starting fires where they probably shouldn't, you can see where that's going. And there's no way to put the fire out, and nobody notices it, and nobody's going to put it out. Instead of a house burning or a structure burning, you may very well get entire cities or entire chunks of cities burning. So think about that in that urban environment. So you might want to go to a place where we discussed previously that is really not around any other surrounding buildings. So it's less likely to burn down. But I think it would be a much bigger thing, and I've seen a lot of nasty fires, especially again after big disasters. So that it's going to be maybe a bigger problem than it normally would be. Now, let's transition. Urban survival blades. Now, a good knife is a good knife, whether you're in suburbia or the inner city or the middle of the wilderness in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. A good knife is a good knife, and you should have a good knife, and I encourage you to carry a good knife as a man, period. There are some uniquely beneficial blades to have in an urban environment. A fireman's axe you may consider having as part of your kit, in your vehicle, in your house. We just mentioned fire. What if you have to make a new way out of a structure, right? What if you have to make a way? That's kind of what the fireman's axe is for, right? Making a way. Now, I'm very familiar with demolitions and urban breaching, making a whole lot of det cord and C4, but you're probably not having that in this scenario. But you can probably have a fireman's axe, and you'd be maybe alarmingly surprised at how easy it is to get through a basic wall of drywall and 2x4s with a fireman's axe. It doesn't take much. You can use that to your advantage. That might be a good tool to have for many different reasons. So that fireman's axe are really handy. Also, less cool in the tactical spectrum, but probably more practical, a small shovel. Especially if you're going to stay in a certain area for a while. Remember I mentioned going to the bathroom? Well, going back again to the Bible, there's a rule for that. This is from Deuteronomy. Also you shall have a place outside the camp where you may go out, and you shall have an implement among your equipment. And when you sit down outside, You shall dig with it and turn and cover your refuse. For the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and give your enemies over to you. Therefore your camp shall be holy, that he may see no unclean thing among you and turn away from you. You shall have an implement among your equipment. You shall turn and cover your refuse. If you're going to stay in one place for a while, dig a trench. Fairly long, maybe only 6 inches or a foot deep. And you would go to the bathroom in it, and all the dirt would be piled up on a side. If you went to the bathroom in it, you would take your implement, we had e-tools, and you would take and cover it up. And the next person would go in front of you, and you'd cover it up and cover it up and cover it up. And when you needed to, you'd dig a new trench. It's kind of standard practice. You're going to be in one place, like you have gone to one of these areas we talked about. You're going to the bathroom. Disease kills a lot of people. Dirty water kills a lot of people. Deal with your nastiness, right? A practical thing to have, maybe just a small little gardening shovel, maybe an e-tool, which is also a nasty weapon. My favorite is the Spetsnaz shovel. I use that thing all the time. Stays in my truck. It comes in handy in all kinds of circumstances. So if you're in a wetter city, and we talk about this nasty, disease-ridden water, the things you often do in the wilderness you can apply to a city. If you're camping out outside, you're in a street, an alley, an industrial area, whatever, you can use some hydraulic engineering and make sure that water routes around your camp, goes off your tarp, doesn't pool up where you're going to sleep. One, for pure temperature control of your body, which will kill you, but also to get that nasty, filthy city water away from you. So again, a small shovel, survival blade. Also, and this would be handy in a lot of environments too, but especially in a city, if you're any kind of like engineer at heart, or handyman, or anything like that, a good multi-tool, something good to have. Again, I think it's a place for a good do-it-all blade, a good fixed blade, or a good folding pocket knife, but a multi-tool is probably worth the wait. A pair of pliers for stripping wire can make really good cordage. A file, a saw for making other tools. Any number of things that come on a multi-tool. You might really consider, especially in an urban environment, a multi-tool. Another one, urban survival. Caltrops. You can look up what those are, but they're basically bent pieces of metal. I've heard, somebody told me in one of the chats, the Patreon chat, that caltrops are illegal. I've never seen anywhere where they were illegal in a penal code, but maybe they are where you are. Caltrop is basically a piece of metal that you bend and shape, pointy no matter which way you throw it. You can think of why that might be useful around your camp, or making a road impassable, or any number of reasons. Somebody's following you in a vehicle, whatever the case might be, right? Caltrops, urban survival blade, you might look at those. And even if they are illegal, if you are familiar with them and you have a multi-tool, going back to the previous blade, you can probably make them out of a lot of scrap metal that might be laying around. Now, you may be thinking, he just talked about urban survival knives. Next, he's going to talk about urban survival guns. And I may at some point in an entirely different episode. If you don't know, there's a whole other podcast called Gunfighter Life. Maybe that's a better episode for that, where I talk all about urban specific survival gun choices. So make sure you're subscribed. If you want to stay in tune with this and the other podcasts, subscribe to this podcast. Go over to Gunfighter Life, subscribe to it as well. And a brief reminder, if you want to become a patron, we have one of the benefits is a Patreon chat. We talk about stuff like this all the time. Guns and knives and more substantial stuff like Bible verses and interpretations and sermons. Anyway, urban survival guns, maybe an episode on Gunfighter Life, as maybe bugging out of a city, maybe a future episode that ties into this. Like, how do you get out? Now, I don't want to end this on a somber note. Civilizations collapse. Period. That's kind of what they do. That's the end of their life cycle. And a lot of people nowadays live in cities, urban environments. I don't think they're the best place to be, in good times or bad, but a lot of people are there. There are some advantages to being in a city. Resources. The best one of that being people. People absolutely probably will be one of your biggest threats. They also absolutely can be one of your greatest assets, especially if you have a predetermined community. So there are people in cities. That can be a really bad thing in a disaster. If people are doing evil, it can be an absolutely good thing if people are doing good and band together. So there's some hope there. Also, there are other resources in cities. There's a lot of metal in cities. If you look at prior to very recently, metal is a very precious thing. Iron, copper, tin, lead. These things are really important, and the longer that collapse goes on, if it's a really long one, metal is going to be a precious material, along with many other things, and you find most metal in cities. You can do a lot of things with the stuff in cities. You talk about versus wilderness. Yeah, you can make a knife in a wilderness environment. You can absolutely get a rock and shape it and nap it. But in almost any urban suburban environment, it won't take long looking around just today at just scrap material that's laying around and be able to make a much better knife. The Iron Age was a big thing in human history for a reason, and a lot of times in cities there's just scraps of iron, scraps of metal just laying around. Also, like a container. You know how hard it is to fashion a good container in the wilderness to like hold water, make a water filter, carry stuff? Well, I mean, in a city we have so many containers, a lot of people just throw them on the side of the road. And today that's kind of disgusting and gross. But in a disaster, a good, robust, even plastic container could be an important thing. And you're going to find a lot more of that, again, in a city than in the wilderness. There are some advantages to being in a city. No matter what environment you're in, you are not called to live in fear. I think with that, we're going to start wrapping up to tactical tip and the tactical verse of the day. Your tactical tip of the day, if you're not planning on lone wolfing this, if you have anybody in that city that you want to connect with, that you may be separated from, you need to have a very basic thing we use in the military. Rally points. Designated rally points. And I would encourage you not to pick them someplace where everybody's going to go. Like, it probably shouldn't be the Walmart. Maybe it's the dugout at a football field at an elementary school. That's not even connected to the elementary school, right? It's a long ways away. Why? Because probably nobody else is going to go to a dugout at a Little League field in a disaster. So it's probably a good rally point. I'm just making stuff up. Wherever that is for you, that you and your family, your loved ones, your kids, if you get separated, because in a big disaster, comms are likely going to go down. You don't want to be going to find your kids and then your kids show up at home and you're not there, but a bad guy's there looting your stuff, or any number of other things. Have designated, predetermined rally points. Probably a couple. When my wife and I, when I was the commander of a tactical team and we were in a city, we had these. You also might want a simple way to communicate whether somebody has been there and already left and gone to the next rally point or not. Maybe it's 3 crushed aluminum cans. It could be any number of things to say, I've already been here, I've moved on. So at least then you know. Also, simple code words. If you are together and one of you notices something is wrong, and you don't want to shout it from the rooftops, but you want everybody else to know something is wrong, you might have simple code words. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. These are kind of commonly known examples that you might say, and everybody around you might, oh, hey, something's not right here. Maybe there's other people around and you don't want them to know. So, a couple of easy tactical tips that cost you nothing to have a designated rally point. With that, the tactical verse of the day. I can think of none better than Joshua chapter 1. No man shall be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide an inheritance in the land which I swore to your fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Wherever, whatever environment. We're not called to live in fear, men. Stand up, be strong, and prove yourself a man. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.